So after James Miller led police to the discovery of the remains of Julie Makita here on Bower Boundary Road in Annandale, Miller was then driven a considerable distance to Port Gawler, and it's about 100 kilometres from the Bower Boundary Road out to Port Gawler Beach. Miller was driven there at about 12:40 a.m. so in the middle of the night, now Thursday, May 24th, 1979, and Miller said he would locate the remains of Deborah Lamb. But after about an hour of searching, and Miller could not locate the grave of Deborah Lamb, police said they would bring Miller back in the daylight. They still weren't finished for the night, however, because after Port Gawler they then drove back towards the city and back towards Wingfield, where Miller said he would locate the body of Tanya Kenny, which was in this region here in Wingfield. By now it was about 2:20 a.m. but Miller was unable to find Tanya Kenny's remains also. So then Miller was driven back to the Angus Street Police Headquarters in the city. Let's just pull back here, and Angus Street Police Headquarters is, just trying to find it on here. Yeah, that's it there. So yeah, Angus Street, the old police headquarters, not there anymore. They've moved the police headquarters, but the old police headquarters used to be in Angus Street in the centre of Adelaide. So Miller was driven back there at 4 a.m. He was interviewed some more. He'd already been charged with the murder of Connie Ordonides before setting out to find the bodies. The following day, or during the daytime hours of May 24th, 1979, Miller is charged with 4 more murders, and he's remanded to the Adelaide Gaol, the old Adelaide jail. Of course, if you remember, that's where Miller had met Worrell in. On Friday, May 25th, 1979, police digging around Wingfield discovered the remains of Tanya Kenny. So Tanya's body was located in the Wingfield area. And then on Tuesday, May the 29th, 1979, police searching in the Port Gawler Beach area, they located the remains of Deborah Lamb in this general area. When they found Deborah, her hands and feet were still bound by cord. So by May the 29th, 1979, all 7 victims of Christopher Worrell and the Truro murders had been found. 5 around the Truro district, and 1 each at Port Gawler and Wingfield. And James Miller was facing all 7 murder charges. James Miller is charged with the 7 murders, and on Monday, September the 3rd, 1979, James Miller's committal hearing opens in Adelaide, and Miller is committed to stand trial for all 7 murders. On Tuesday, February the 12th, 1980, Miller's trial opens in the Supreme Court of South Australia in Adelaide. After 1 month of a trial, of course, Miller pleaded not guilty. On Wednesday, March the 12th, 1980, James Miller is convicted of 6 murders. He is acquitted of the first murder, that of Veronica Knight. In 1999, James Miller applies for a non-parole period to be set. Now, this is a little confusing. I just assumed that Miller, back in 1980, had a non-parole period set. It was very unusual in those days for a person not to have a non-parole period set. It was very rare for people to be sentenced to life without parole. But I guess he was, if Miller had to apply for a non-parole period to be set. And so on February the 8th, 2000, Miller was granted a non-parole period of 35 years, meaning he was eligible for parole in 2014. So they must have backdated that 35 years back to 1979 to when he was first charged with the murders. So he would have been eligible for parole in 2014, but James Miller never made it to 2014, for on October the 21st, 2008, Miller dies at the age of 68 from a combination of liver failure, prostate cancer and lung cancer. I believe he was in the Royal Adelaide Hospital when he died. Of course, he'd been in Yatala prison since his conviction, and I guess they transferred him to hospital when the end was near. So when Miller died, he'd been in prison for 29 years. So the death of James Miller brought an end to the chapter of the Truro murders here in South Australia. We are in Enfield Memorial Park, Enfield Cemetery, and I'm here at the grave of Deborah Lamb. Now, it's a bit hard to read Deborah's headstone. A bit dark in the afternoon here, but this is Deborah Lamb's final resting place. I'll see if I can zoom in and you can read that a bit better. I know it's difficult, but you can make out Lamb in loving memory of Deborah Ann, passed away February 12th. Does that say 1970? Should be 77. Looks like 79. Age 20 years. Also her father is here also, Raymond James. Looks like September 4th, 1982, just age 49. Not, as I said, not easy to read. But this is Deborah Lamb's final resting place. Deborah was born on May the 12th, 1956. She was murdered on February the 12th, 1977. Of course, Deborah was last seen in Hindley Street that night in the city, and she was found. Her remains were found at Port Gawler on May the 29th, 1977. So now the section I'm in right now is the Anglican lawn section. Deborah's grave is in aisle CC, grave number 38. So just giving you a location of where it is. As I said, it's a bit difficult to read, but this is where it is. So the final resting place of Deborah Lamb. Rest in peace, Deborah. Here at Centennial Park, we are in Lawn 1, Path 34, and looking for the grave of Tanya Kenny. Tanya is buried in grave number 1724, which is just over here. This is the gravesite of Tanya Kenny. Tanya Ruth Kenny, 1961 to 1977, dearly loved daughter of Marlene and John and sister of Katrina and Matthew. Quote, "She whom we love and lose is no longer where she was before. She is now wherever we are." End quote. Yes, I like that quote, very nice. Now Tanya was Christopher Worrell's second victim. She was last seen, picked up on January the 2nd, 1977 at Pulteney Street at the end of Rundle Mall. And Tanya's body was found on May the 25th, 1979 in Wingfield. Tanya was 15 years old, and she was buried here at Centennial Park on July the 18th, 1979. Rest in peace, Tanya. I'm now in the Catholic section, Centennial Park Catholic A, Path A0, and we're looking for grave 900, which is the final resting place of Julie Makita. This is Julie's grave right here. Now this is an interesting tombstone. Julie's marker is at the bottom there. See, it simply reads Juliet Helen Makita, 27/1960, 22/1/1977. And above the Julie marker is another grave headstone. F.L. Norton died in April 1952. So it says beloved husband of Helen, father of Anne Marie, Robin and Meredith. So I'm not 100%, in fact I don't know who Norton is, F.L. Norton. If anyone out there knows that, be handy to know. But so that's Juliet's gravestone. Of course, Julie was 16 years old. She was abducted on January the 22nd, 1977. She was last seen in front of the Old Ambassadors Hotel in King William Street in Adelaide. Her body was found on May the 24th, 1979 in Annandale, which is just outside Truro. And she was buried here on July the 20th, 1979. The final resting place of Julie Makita. Rest in peace, Julie. Here at Centennial Park in the Orthodox AG General section on row or path 7, looking for grave number 172, which is the grave of Connie Iordanides. It's grave 172, as I said, and here it is right here. It's extremely elaborate headstone. If we just get in a bit closer here, that's Connie or Constantina, Connie for short. It says born 30/6/1961 in Melbourne, died 9/2/1977 in Adelaide, aged 16 years. Next to Connie is Zoe. I assume was her sister, born March 16, 1965, which is, what's that, about 3 years after Connie? Yeah, in Melbourne, and died on July 24th, 2007 here in Adelaide, age 42, so she also died very young. Dearly loved daughters of Ordonitas and Georgia, loved sisters of Despina and Costa. There's some more tributes there, but a bit hard to read with the flowers. I'm not going to move the flowers there. Missed by family and friends, I believe that says. So yeah, Connie, of course, she was last seen on February the 9th, 1977 on King William Street. That's when Miller and Worrell were pulled over by the police for having a defective car, and she was sitting across the street when Worrell noticed her and drove over to her. Connie's body was found on April the 26th, 1977 in Truro, and she was buried here in Centennial Park on December the 3rd, 1979, her final resting place. Amazingly elaborate tombstone, isn't it? Looks like a little light down there, just flickering away. Some Greek writing. So here we are. Rest in peace, Connie. I just want to mention that I have been unable to find or locate the final resting places of Sylvia Pittman and Vicky Howell. Despite searching high and wide, simply do not know what cemetery they were buried in. If they were even buried in a cemetery, they may have been cremated. So I do not know their final resting places. As for Veronica Knight, Veronica is buried at the North Brighton Cemetery in Adelaide, but I'm unable to locate her grave because of, well, I just simply can't find a map. I know where North Brighton Cemetery is, but I'm without a map. It's a bit of looking like a needle in a haystack. So, but I have included a photo of Veronica's gravesite that has been provided online. So to finish this video, just want to say, Veronica Knight, rest in peace. Sylvia Pittman, rest in peace. And Vicky Howell, rest in peace.